The elderly woman noticed a young girl she didn't recognize, sitting beside her daughter's grave and quietly crying. As she got closer, her heart sank at the eerie words the girl was softly whispering. Emma moved slowly through the quiet paths of Phoenix Cemetery, a bouquet of white flowers clutched in one hand, with a weathered photograph held tightly in the other. She made her way to her daughter Claire's grave, and with effort, knelt beside it, carefully placing the flowers and the photo on the cold, stone marker. "Another year, my dear," Emma murmured, her voice trembling, breaking the stillness around her. "It feels like only yesterday you were here with me, laughing and walking by my side. How I wish things could have been different." Gently, she ran her fingers over the edges of the photograph, her touch lingering on Claire's face. The memories of her daughter, so vivid and alive in her heart, flooded her mind. The warmth of every smile, the comfort of every hug, and the heartbreak of each goodbye, leading to that tragic day. Claire Scott had been a vibrant young woman, full of life. At just 28, she worked as a graphic designer at a marketing agency, known for her creativity, quick wit, and the way her smile could light up any room. Her death, which came 3 years ago, had been an unbearable blow to Emma and to everyone who knew Claire. The accident that took her life had been swift and brutal. Claire had been driving home from a business trip when her car slid off a slick curve and slammed into a pole. The crash was so violent that the wreckage was unrecognizable, and Claire was declared dead at the scene. At the time, no one questioned the details, especially not with the stormy weather that had been reported on the night of the accident. Her death left an aching emptiness in Emma's life. Claire had been her only child, and with her gone, Emma was not only deprived of her daughter's presence, but also of her only true family. The grief was overwhelming, and the visits to Claire's grave became a sacred ritual, moments when Emma felt as though she could still reach her daughter, somehow. "Time heals all wounds," Emma whispered to herself, but with each passing year, the ache only seemed to deepen. She sighed, gazing at the headstone engraved with the words "Beloved Daughter." "Could I have done something to save you? My sweet girl, I miss you so much." Guilt and sadness washed over her as she spoke to the daughter she could no longer touch, her heart heavy with questions that would never be answered. Suddenly, a soft sob broke the silence, pulling Emma from her sorrowful thoughts. She turned, noticing a small girl standing by the grave. The child was quietly crying, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "Mommy, why did you die? I wish you were here with me. I love you. I miss you so much." Tears streaked down the girl's face. Emma, both curious and concerned, stood up and approached her slowly. "Hello, sweetheart," she said gently. "Are you okay?" Her voice was soft, filled with a maternal concern that had never faded. The girl looked up at Emma, her face streaked with tears, an expression of deep sadness etched into her features. I always come here," the girl choked out between sobs. "This is my mommy's grave. But I don't understand. Why does it have someone else's name? It says Claire Scott, but that's not her name. I'm so confused." The innocent confusion in the girl's eyes struck Emma deeply, the new mystery unraveling before her. Emma sat beside the girl, her heart aching. "Let's try to figure this out together, okay?" she said, wrapping an arm gently around the girl's shoulders. The girl looked up at her, her eyes full of uncertainty. "What's your name?" Emma asked softly. "Samantha," the girl replied, a faint smile breaking through her tears. "Samantha Lewis." Emma nodded, her determination growing. She felt a pull to help this child, perhaps as a way to ease her own grief over the unanswered questions that had haunted her. "Samantha, sweetheart," Emma said kindly, "tell me more about your mommy." Samantha wiped her tears with a handkerchief that Emma had offered, her eyes searching for the courage to speak. "My mommy," Samantha began in a trembling voice. "Her name was Anna. Anna Lewis. I remember her always smiling and singing to me. She left me when I was just 5. Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes as she continued, her voice a fragile whisper. "They told me she got very sick and died, and that she's buried here." Just then, a man, presumably her father, approached. "It's true," he said, his voice thick with sorrow. I've brought Samantha here many times, trying to comfort her, telling her that her mommy is at peace. But I never understood why the name on the headstone wasn't hers. George, the man, sounded frustrated and confused. I always thought it was some mistake, maybe a bureaucratic error or something, he said, his eyes filled with pain as he stared at the headstone. Anna was everything to us. And when she died, everything changed. I never got any official documents about her burial, just verbal assurances from the hospital and funeral home. He paused, shaking his head. When I saw Claire Scott on this stone, I didn't know what to think. We were so lost in our grief, I didn't question it as I should have. Emma, listening intently, felt the weight of George's pain. George, I believe something very wrong happened here, she said, her voice firm with resolve. And I'm going to find out what it is. Not just for Claire, but for Anna and for you too. George nodded in gratitude, his voice heavy. Thank you, Emma. It means so much to have someone help us understand what really happened. Samantha deserves to know where her mother is truly resting. Emma's heart tightened as she heard George's words. She knew all too well the unbearable pain of losing a daughter. No one, especially a child, should have to endure such confusion. I'll help you find the answers, Emma promised. We'll need to look at the cemetery records. Maybe there was a mistake, something overlooked. They decided to head to the cemetery office together. We need to see the burial records for this section of the cemetery. Something isn't right, and we'll get to the bottom of it, Emma said, trying to sound confident in order to reassure the girl beside her. At the office, Emma spoke firmly to the employee who greeted them. Please, we need access to the records for a grave listed under Claire Scott. There may have been an error, and we need to clear this up for the sake of a child who's already lost her mother. The employee, a middle-aged man with a weary expression, nodded and began to sift through the files. This is highly unusual, he said, but I'll see what I can find out. As the man searched both the physical records and the computer, Emma and Samantha sat in silence, holding hands. Emma turned to the girl, offering a soft, encouraging smile. We'll find out what's going on, sweetie, she reassured her. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. Samantha gave her hand a tight squeeze, looking to Emma for comfort in her promise. After a few tense minutes, the employee looked up from his screen, a look of surprise crossing his face. There's something strange here, he said. I see an internal notice about confusion with grave markings from a few years ago. I can't give you details right now, but I'll look into it further. Emma felt a mixture of relief and unease. Please do. We need answers, she urged. The man promised to investigate and do what he could. They thanked him and left the office. And as Emma walked out, she felt a small sense of progress. She was one step closer to uncovering the truth that connected two families through a web of mistakes and hidden secrets. Emma knew this was far from over. The next day, she made an appointment with a professional who might help resolve the issue once and for all. She went to the office of Dr. Raphael Adrian, a calm, collected man whose demeanor immediately put her at ease. Dr. Adrian, thank you for seeing me, Emma began, her voice betraying the tension of months spent in uncertainty and grief. I'm here to discuss a matter that's deeply personal and sensitive. Dr. Adrian nodded, signaling her to continue. Of course. How can I assist you, Mrs. Adams? Taking a deep breath, Emma gathered her thoughts and steeled herself. There's confusion surrounding a grave at the local cemetery. It's supposed to be my daughter's final resting place, but now I'm beginning to suspect that someone else might be buried there. Dr. Adrian listened attentively, his hands folded on the desk, his expression serious. I see. And how exactly do you believe I can assist with this situation? He asked, maintaining a professional but compassionate tone. Emma's voice was steady, though the weight of the request hung heavily in the air. We need to conduct a DNA test to confirm the identity of the remains. I understand it's not a typical request, but it's absolutely crucial for me and for a little girl who's also involved. Dr. Adrian nodded, fully understanding the gravity of the situation. A DNA test on remains can be a complicated process, but it's certainly doable. We'll need legal authorization to proceed. Do you have access to the necessary documents? Emma confirmed that she would begin working on the legal paperwork right away. Once we have authorization, we can move forward, she said, her voice resolute. I'll make sure everything is in order on my end, so there are no delays once we have permission, Dr. Adrian assured her, taking notes. I understand how urgent this is. Emma felt a sense of relief wash over her. Thank you, Dr. Adrian. Your help is more comforting than I can put into words. I truly hope that with your expertise, we can bring some peace to everyone involved. As she left Dr. Adrian's office, Emma felt as though she was finally taking control, ready to face whatever truth awaited her. Later, sitting on the porch of her home, Emma gazed absently at the garden, the one she and Claire had lovingly tended together. The sky above was a painting of warm colors as the sun began to set, its last rays touching the flowers in the garden, casting long shadows over the earth. She waited for the DNA results, her mind drifting to the past. Her thoughts wandered to moments she'd shared with Claire, now seen through a different lens. One memory in particular came to the forefront. An afternoon just before Claire's disappearance. "Mom, there are things in this world that are necessary, even if they don't seem right," Claire had said, her voice strange and distant as she worked the soil around a new plant. Emma had dismissed it at the time, but now those words echoed in her mind, heavy with meaning. "What did you mean by that, my daughter?" she whispered to herself, her unease growing. Another memory resurfaced, Claire's distant gaze on certain occasions, as though carrying some heavy secret that she couldn't share. Emma recalled one particular night when she noticed a worried expression on her daughter's face at dinner. "Is everything okay, dear?" Emma had asked. Claire had smiled and assured her that it was, but the look in her eyes told a different story. I should have pressed her for answers, Emma thought, self-reproach tightening her chest. She remembered how, in the weeks leading up to Claire's disappearance, Claire had received frequent phone calls. She would leave the room to speak in hushed tones, and though Emma had always respected her daughter's privacy, now she regretted not asking more questions. "Who was on the other end of the line, Claire? Who pulled you away from me?" Emma murmured, the grief making her voice tremble. The pain of her loss was overwhelming, like a fog that never quite lifted. Now, as she replayed these fragmented memories, Emma began to see a troubling and clearer picture of her last days with Claire. Maybe all of this was a warning, a sign of something much larger to come, she thought, a chilling suspicion settling in her heart. It felt like piecing together a puzzle with missing pieces, each clue revealing just a sliver of the truth. Days later, Emma received the long-awaited call from Dr. Adrian's office. She sat anxiously in the waiting room, her body tense as she gripped the armrests. The door opened, and Dr. Adrian walked in, holding an envelope. His face was neutral, but the air in the room was thick with anticipation. "The DNA test results are here," he said, his voice calm, trying to cushion the weight of the news. Emma held her breath, heart pounding in her chest. Dr. Adrian glanced at the results, then met her gaze. "I'm afraid the remains do not match your daughter's DNA," he said gently. Dr. Adrian looked directly at Emma, his voice heavy with the weight of the revelation. "The remains, they don't match your daughter's DNA." The world seemed to tilt beneath Emma's feet. For a moment, the air in the room felt too thin, as though it had been sucked away entirely. "No, this can't be," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes blurred with tears as the crushing reality began to settle over her, squeezing her chest. Emma struggled to comprehend the full impact of what she had just heard. "Then who is buried under my daughter's headstone? And where is Claire?" she asked, each word laden with pain and confusion, as if each question was a blow to the heart, shattering the fragile hope she'd been clinging to. Dr. Adrian reached out, offering her a handkerchief. His eyes were filled with sympathy as he spoke gently. "I am so sorry, Emma. I know this raises more questions than answers. I need to understand what happened," Emma said, her voice firm despite the weight of her grief. "I need to know where my daughter is. I have to find her." Her words were resolute, driven by the unyielding determination of a mother who would not rest until the truth was uncovered. Dr. Adrian nodded solemnly, recognizing the strength in her voice. "I will help you however I can, Emma. We can start by contacting the local authorities, maybe even hire a private investigator. It won't be easy, He continued, "But we will do everything we can to uncover the truth." Emma left the doctor's office feeling a strange mix of shock and resolve. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges and heartache, but she also understood that there was no turning back. "For you, Claire, I will do whatever it takes," she whispered under her breath, her eyes lifting to the overcast sky as if seeking some measure of comfort there. The fight to uncover the truth about her daughter was only just beginning. The following day, Emma walked into the office of Detective Brandon Parker, her mind racing with thoughts of the next steps. Brandon stood up when he saw her enter, greeting her warmly. "Mrs. Adams, it's good to see you again. How can I help you today?" He gestured to a chair across from his desk, which was cluttered with papers and files. Emma sat down, setting her bag beside her, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her shoulders. "Mr. Parker," Emma began, her voice steady but laced with urgency, "I've come to you with something very serious. The remains in my daughter's grave, Claire, aren't hers. I need to find out where her body really is, or if she's still alive." Her voice faltered for a moment, but the determination in her eyes was unmistakable. Brandon's expression grew serious, his attention focused entirely on her. "This is a grave matter, Emma," he said. "Do you have any additional information that could help us get started? Any detail, no matter how small, could be crucial." He grabbed a notebook and pen, ready to document everything. "After the DNA test showed that the remains weren't Claire's, I started thinking back to the last days before she disappeared," Emma explained. "I remembered strange phone calls, behaviors that seemed off at the time." She began to recount every detail, no matter how insignificant it had seemed back then. Each memory now felt like a potential clue, a piece of the puzzle that had been waiting to be connected. Brandon listened intently, asking occasional questions to clarify things. "You mentioned phone calls," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Do you have any idea who she might have been speaking to? Are there any records of these calls?" Emma nodded, recalling the frequent calls Claire had received, calls she had never questioned at the time. "No, I never asked, but I wish I had." Brandon made some notes, already thinking ahead to how he could piece the investigation together. "I'll start by looking into those calls and talking to people who were close to Claire around that time," he said, his voice resolute. "We'll find out what happened, Emma. You're not alone in this." Emma felt a small spark of hope at his words. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but Brandon's commitment gave her the strength to face whatever came next. A few days later, Emma sat across from Brandon in a small cafe, a collection of photos, notes, and papers spread out on the table between them. Brandon pointed to a photograph of a group of people, some of whom were circled in red. "Emma, I spoke with some of Claire's former colleagues," Brandon began, his tone serious. "It seems she got involved with some people tied to very dangerous activities." He tapped the photos. "These individuals are known in the local underworld." Emma's heart sank as she looked at the pictures. "My God, Brandon, this is much worse than I imagined. How did Claire get involved with these people?" Her voice was filled with both fear and disbelief, but beneath that was a rising determination. She needed to understand how her daughter had become involved with such dangerous people. "We're starting to put the pieces together," Brandon said, continuing to explain. "I also found out that Claire was frequenting places she normally wouldn't have. These locations," he slid a map across the table, dotted with red marks. "These spots are linked to illegal activities. It looks like she was either trying to infiltrate or was pressured into getting involved." Emma absorbed the information, each new revelation sinking deeper into her chest. "We need to visit these places," she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising within her. "We need to talk to people. If Claire was mixed up with this crowd, there's a chance she's in danger, but it could also be the key to finding her." Brandon looked at her with concern, but nodded in agreement. "I'll make arrangements for us to visit these locations safely. I can get some backup and arrange for cover, but I need you to be cautious. I don't want you exposed to any unnecessary risks." Emma locked eyes with him, her resolve clear. "I don't care about the risks," she said, her voice unwavering. "I will do whatever it takes. Nothing will stop me from finding out what happened to Claire. I will go to the ends of the earth if that's what it takes." Her determination was palpable, the fierce love of a mother who would stop at nothing to uncover the truth about her daughter. Brandon, seeing the resolve in Emma's eyes, understood they would face whatever came their way together, no matter the risks. Emma and Brandon were driving through the less familiar streets of Phoenix, areas Emma had seldom visited. Brandon navigated carefully, his eyes sharp and watchful. "These places we're heading into," he began, "they're known for illegal activities. We need to tread very carefully here." Emma gazed out the window, noting the run-down buildings and dark alleys. "I never thought Phoenix had places like this," she murmured, her voice barely audible, weighed down by the tension. How could Claire have gotten involved in all this? What was she thinking? Brandon responded, his tone thoughtful. "Sometimes people get caught up in situations before they even realize the danger. By the time they do, it's often too late." He stopped the car near an old warehouse. "Let's start here. I've heard this could be a spot for some of Claire's contacts." They both stepped out and made their way toward the warehouse, staying out of sight. Emma's heart raced. Each sound felt sharper in the oppressive quiet. Brandon raised a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay silent. They peered through the grimy windows, straining to catch any signs of activity inside. Inside, they saw a group gathered around a table, speaking in hushed tones. Brandon gently pulled Emma back out of view. "These are likely some of her contacts. We can't confront them directly. It's too dangerous. I'll snap some photos and see if I can identify them later." He pulled a small camera from his jacket. Still hiding, Emma's emotions were a confusing blend of fear and determination. "We need to keep going, Brandon," she said firmly. "As much as this terrifies me, I have to know the truth. Claire is my daughter, and I'd do anything for her." Her strength only deepened Brandon's resolve. He nodded, fully understanding her fierce dedication. Together, they returned to the car, ready to follow the next lead, knowing each step was drawing them closer to the truth about Claire. Later, Brandon sat in his office, reviewing the photos he'd taken at the warehouse when his phone rang. The number was unknown. Reluctantly, he answered, holding the phone to his ear. "Hello." His voice was wary, alert for any hint of danger. The voice on the other end was distorted, but the message was clear and chilling. "You're interfering where you don't belong. Stop this investigation now." A cold shiver ran down Brandon's spine, but his voice remained even. "Who is this? Why should I stop?" There was a brief pause, then the voice returned, more menacing. "That's not your concern. But if you don't stop, there will be consequences." The call ended abruptly, leaving Brandon holding the phone, his pulse quickening at the threat. Despite the fear, he knew he couldn't turn back now. He thought of Emma and everything she was going through. She couldn't face this alone. "They're trying to scare us," Brandon muttered, his anger rising alongside his determination. "But that means we're on the right track. They're hiding something big, and they'll do anything to keep it covered up." He decided to call Emma and tell her about the threatening call. "Emma, I got a warning. They want us to stop the investigation. I just thought you should know." On the other end, Emma's voice was stronger than ever. "That's awful, Brandon. But we can't let them intimidate us. We have to keep going. If they're trying to scare us, it means we're close to the truth. Are you okay?" Her concern was clear, but there was also a resolve in her tone. "I'm fine, Emma. And you're right. We'll be more careful, but we won't stop," Brandon replied, feeling renewed by her unwavering commitment. Together, they agreed to take extra precautions, knowing that from here on, they'd need even more courage and caution. "Nothing will stop us, Emma. We're going to uncover the truth. No matter what," he added, preparing himself for whatever came next. Brandon and Emma continued their investigation. They were parked a safe distance from an abandoned factory on Phoenix's outskirts. An informant had mentioned this location. Brandon kept his focus on the streets. "This is it, Emma. My contact says this place has been used for illegal meetings, and Claire's name came up several times." Brandon was peering through binoculars at the factory. Emma felt a tight knot in her chest. "Do you think she could be inside?" she asked, trying to sneak a look out the car window without being noticed. "I'm not sure, but something big is going on here, and we need to find out what it is," Brandon said, his voice low but determined. "Let's wait until it's darker. Going in now would be too risky." He put away the binoculars, checking that his gun was safely tucked under his coat. Emma nodded, understanding that caution was their only advantage. Hours passed as the light slowly faded, and the factory was swallowed by shadow. Brandon checked his watch and then glanced at Emma. "It's time. We need to move quickly and quietly. Are you ready?" Emma took a deep breath, then nodded firmly. "I'm ready. Let's find my daughter." They crept toward the building, the door slightly ajar as if someone had rushed off and forgotten to close it. Brandon entered first, with Emma close behind, both on high alert for any sound or movement. The interior was dark and still, save for the occasional drip of water and the scurrying of rats. They found signs that the place had been used recently: a lit cigarette still warm, empty food cans, and most importantly, a coat. A woman's coat. Emma immediately recognized it. "This is Claire's coat. She was here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Brandon placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're close, Emma. We're going to find out what happened." They continued their search, moving cautiously through the dark hallways. As they passed a lit room, they heard voices. Brandon gestured for Emma to stay quiet, and they approached the partially open door, hidden in the shadows. Inside, they saw a woman with her back turned, speaking to someone out of sight. Emma's heart raced. "Claire," she whispered to herself, her voice full of emotion. Unable to hold back, she stepped forward, calling out, "Claire!" Her voice was louder than she meant it to be. The woman turned sharply, her eyes wide with surprise and suspicion. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice laced with defensiveness as she tried to see who had called her. Emma froze, a wave of emotions crashing over her as she recognized her daughter's face, though time and circumstances had altered it. "It's me, Emma, your mother," she said softly, taking cautious steps forward. She extended her hands, a silent gesture of peace. "Please, Claire, I know it's you. We've been searching for you for so long." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, her voice shaking with every word. Claire's gaze flickered between confusion and recognition. "Mom," she whispered finally, the resistance in her eyes beginning to soften. But there was still fear there, mingled with the emotion. "Mom, you shouldn't be here," Claire said, her voice trembling. "It's too dangerous. You need to leave. I can't risk anything happening to you both." Emma, undeterred, moved closer and gently took Claire's hands in hers. "I'm not going anywhere, Claire," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "I won't let you face this alone. Wherever you are, that's where I need to be. We're in this together, no matter what." Claire's face twisted with worry as she tried to protest. "Mom, please. I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Emma squeezed her hands and looked deep into her eyes. "There is no place in the world I'd rather be than by your side. Nothing is going to take me away from you, my daughter. We will get through this together." Claire, seeing the unshakable determination in her mother's eyes, realized there was no convincing her to leave. With tears in her own eyes, she nodded slowly. I had to do this. I had to disappear. It was the only way to protect all of us." Her voice was a hushed whisper, filled with pain and regret. Emma moved closer, pulling Claire into a tight embrace. "None of that matters now," she whispered, holding her daughter close. "What matters is that you're alive, and now we can help you. We'll protect you." Brandon, observing from the shadows, remained alert, knowing the danger wasn't over. But seeing Emma and Claire reunited brought some peace to his heart. He understood how much this moment meant to Emma. In a quiet corner of the abandoned building, Emma and Claire sat, the weight of their conversation heavy in the air. Claire spoke first, her face drawn with exhaustion and anxiety. "Mom, when I got involved with these people, I had no idea how deep I was getting. At first, it was just small favors, things that seemed harmless. But then I realized it was all much bigger, more dangerous than I ever imagined." Emma's heart ached with every word, her chest tightening as Claire continued. "They started threatening my friends, our family," Claire went on, her voice cracking with the fear she'd kept bottled up for so long. "I was scared, Mom. They told me the only way to keep everyone safe was for me to disappear. So we staged my death. Claire paused, swallowing hard. Her pain was evident in her eyes. I didn't know what else to do. I ran far away, changed my name, my whole identity, all to protect the people I love. I wanted to tell the truth, Claire added, her voice growing smaller. But they were always watching me. Only recently did I manage to get a little space. But even then, it wasn't really living. It's just been hiding. A deep sigh escaped her, filled with a resignation that spoke of years of fear. Emma, her hands trembling as she held Claire's, gave her daughter a long, searching look. Claire, what you've been through? I can hardly imagine, she said, her voice gentle but firm. But now that we know the truth, we'll figure out how to fix this. We'll get you back home, where you belong. Claire looked at her mother, her face tired and worn with the weight of years of hiding. I'm so tired, Mom. Tired of running, of being scared. I just want to go home, but I'm afraid of what might happen if I come back. What it might do to all of us. Emma's expression softened, but she was resolute. What you did was risky, Claire. I'm hurt that I didn't know what was going on, but we can't change the past. Now we have to focus on fixing this. Her voice was a mixture of sorrow and strength, as she absorbed the full weight of the situation. Claire lowered her gaze to her hands, clearly shaken by the magnitude of what she'd done. I know, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. I was trying to protect our family, but I know now that I just made everything worse. Her voice was barely audible, as though the weight of her own guilt was too much to bear. Emma placed a reassuring hand on Claire's, her words calm and steady. We're going to need help, a lawyer to help us navigate all the legal issues that come with your return. And we'll have to talk to the police to explain everything, why you faked your death, everything. Emma was already thinking about the next steps, the practical side of it all. She knew the path ahead would be difficult, and there might be even more painful truths to uncover. But I'll be by your side, Claire. No matter what happens, we won't let you go through this alone. We'll need emotional support too. Maybe a therapist, someone who can help you process everything, especially the trauma of living in hiding for so long. Claire nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Thank you, Mom, she whispered. I don't know if I deserve all this after everything I've caused, but I'm just so grateful you're here. I don't know what I would have done without you. You are my daughter, Emma replied, her voice firm but full of love. Nothing in this world can change that. Together, we'll fix this. It will take time, and it won't be easy, but we're strong. We've always been strong. Emma's resolve gave Claire the strength she needed, and together, they knew they could rebuild the shattered pieces of their lives. They would face the truth, no matter how painful, and fight to restore the family that had been torn apart. When Emma took Claire home, one day, the phone rang. She hesitated before picking it up, a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Hello, she answered, her voice unsteady. On the other end, a distorted voice spoke coldly. You and your detective are interfering where you don't belong. Drop this investigation, or there will be severe consequences. The threat was clear, and Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She took a slow breath, trying to remain calm. I don't know what you're talking about. We're just trying to help my daughter, she said, doing her best to keep the tremor out of her voice, though she felt exposed, knowing someone was watching her every move. The voice on the other end grew more menacing. Listen carefully. This is bigger than you can imagine. If you don't stop, we cannot guarantee the safety of you or your loved ones. The menacing voice on the other end of the line continued its threats before abruptly hanging up, leaving Emma holding the phone, frozen with fear. When Brandon arrived later, Emma wasted no time in telling him about the call, her face drawn with concern. Brandon, they threatened me, she said, her voice trembling. I'm scared of what they might do. Maybe we should stop this. The uncertainty in her voice was palpable as she looked at him, searching for reassurance. Brandon listened quietly, his expression serious as he took in the situation. I understand how you feel, Emma. Your fear is justified, he said. But if we stop now, they'll go unpunished. We can't let them get away with this. His words were calm, but firm. We need to be careful, of course, but we can't back down. I'm with you, and we'll make sure we do this as safely as possible. His steady resolve offered Emma some comfort, and she nodded slowly, her determination to uncover the truth about Claire outweighing her fear. In the days following the phone call, Emma and Brandon decided to ramp up their security. They met at a quiet cafe, choosing a secluded corner where they could talk without being overheard. "We need to think more strategically," Brandon said, scanning the room to ensure no one was paying attention. "I'll contact some colleagues to boost our security, and we might even install surveillance cameras and alarms at your house." Emma nodded in agreement. "I trust you, Brandon. I just don't want to put anyone else in danger. It's bad enough that I'm involved in this." The worry in her voice was evident, and the lines of her face were marked with the weight of responsibility. "I understand," he said, "and I won't let anything happen to you. We'll find out who's behind this and make them pay for what they've done." Brandon's voice was filled with determination, a tone Emma desperately needed to hear. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number, speaking quietly into it. After a short conversation, he hung up and looked at Emma, his expression slightly more relaxed. "My colleagues are going to start patrolling around your house at night, and a friend of mine who specializes in tech is going to install cameras and alarms tomorrow." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her, knowing that she wouldn't be alone in this fight. "Thank you, Brandon. I don't know what I'd do without you," she said, briefly holding his hand as a gesture of gratitude and trust. With the new security measures in place, they continued their investigation, now more determined than ever to find the truth. Weeks passed, filled with sleepless nights and intense investigation. But at last, Emma and Brandon had gathered enough evidence to build a solid case against the gang responsible for Claire's disappearance and the subsequent threats. They had obtained documents, audio recordings, and videos that not only connected the gang to various criminal activities, but also directly implicated them in Claire's case. Brandon cautiously reached out to a special police unit that handled organized crime and corruption. They arranged to meet at a discreet, secure location. When they arrived, Emma and Brandon handed over all the material they had collected, walking the officers through each piece of evidence and explaining how everything connected. The officers were impressed by the thoroughness of the investigation and quickly took action. Using the information provided, they launched a coordinated operation to capture those involved. Tactical teams raided several gang hideouts, and it was a success. Several members were arrested, including the leaders, who were caught off guard and unable to destroy any of the evidence before they were taken into custody. In addition to the arrests, authorities recovered a large number of documents and electronic materials that further solidified their case. Emma was present when the arrests were confirmed, and a sense of relief washed over her. Justice was finally within reach. "We did it, Brandon. Justice has been served," she said, tears welling up in her eyes as she spoke the words she'd longed to say. Brandon, standing beside her, nodded with pride. "You were incredible through all of this, Emma. Your courage and determination are what got us here. We couldn't have done it without you." Together, they watched the legal process begin, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. They had made the streets a little safer, and most importantly, they had honored Claire's bravery in protecting her family. On a quiet afternoon, after the arrests were made, Emma, Claire, and Brandon gathered at a small cafe to celebrate their victory. Claire, overcome with emotion, took both Emma and Brandon's hands, her voice trembling. "I never thought we'd make it here," she began, choking on her words. "Mom, Brandon, I owe my life to both of you. Without your courage and determination, I don't know if I would have had the strength to face all of this." Emma smiled softly at her daughter, squeezing her hand. "Claire, you're my daughter. There's nothing in this world I wouldn't do for you. Seeing you safe and knowing that justice has been done is all I could ask for." Brandon, feeling equally moved, added, "It was a tough road, Claire, but you showed an incredible amount of strength. Helping you and your mom was something I did with all my heart. I'm just relieved that it ended well." Claire looked at both of them, her eyes full of tears. "You didn't just fight for me," she said, her voice breaking. "You gave me a chance to start over. All I want now is to live a life that makes all this effort worthwhile. Thank you for believing in me." Even when everything seemed so dark, Claire continued, her gratitude overflowing. Emma and Brandon smiled at her, a mixture of relief and happiness flooding through them. "No need for thanks, Claire," Emma said softly. "We're family, and families take care of each other." Brandon nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Now, we move forward together." The acknowledgement of their shared strength and commitment cemented their bond, a promise to continue supporting each other no matter what came next. A few days later, Emma and Claire visited the cemetery where it all began. The day was cloudy, the sky overcast with the kind of silence that only moments like these bring. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees as Emma and Claire walked slowly through the rows of graves. They reached the headstone that had caused so much pain and confusion. Emma stared at it for a long moment, still processing the weight of everything that had happened. Emma held the new plaque carefully in her hands, the weight of the moment sinking in. This was no longer about the name of a woman who had been wrongfully buried under a false identity. It was about making things right. "We're here to do what's right, Claire," Emma said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "It's time to correct the mistakes of the past." Claire nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she helped Emma remove the old headstone and set the new one in its place. "I never imagined things would end up like this, Mom," she said softly. "It's strange to be here, not as the person buried, but as someone who still has the chance to make things right." Her voice trembled, but the sense of finality in her words made it clear that this was a new chapter for them both. Together, they worked, both physically and metaphorically reconstructing their lives. "Your name will now be remembered as it should be," Emma said as they carefully placed the plaque. "And the person who rests here can finally have peace." The headstone, now engraved with the name Anna Lewis, marked the end of one story and the beginning of another. The woman who had been hidden behind Claire's identity could now be properly honored. Claire placed a fresh bouquet of flowers at the base, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry for everything, Anna," she whispered. "And thank you, Mom, for standing by me, even when I didn't deserve it." Emma wrapped her arms around her daughter, offering the comfort of her embrace. "We'll overcome this together, Claire. What matters is that you're here, and we're fixing what went wrong. That's what families do. They support each other no matter what." They both stood there for a long while, letting the weight of the moment settle in. When they finally walked away from the grave, it wasn't just the truth they left behind. It was a chapter of their lives they hoped to close for good, ready to start fresh, together, stronger than before. As the investigation progressed, things began to return to normal, but it wasn't just the case that was evolving. Claire and George, who had worked closely together throughout the investigation, began to grow closer on a personal level. Their partnership, rooted in mutual respect and shared determination, slowly began to blossom into something more. One afternoon, after another long session of reviewing documents and plans, Claire and George found themselves sitting alone at a small cafe near Brandon's office. They were having coffee, the weight of the past few months making the quiet moment feel like a rare kind of peace. George looked at Claire with a new appreciation, his voice filled with admiration. "Claire," he began, his tone gentle, "I've always known you were incredibly strong and determined. But seeing you fight for your family like this," he paused, as if gathering his thoughts, "it makes me respect you even more." Claire smiled, touched by his words. "Thank you, George," she replied. "It's been a long, difficult journey, but knowing that I'm not alone in it, that I have people like you, Emma, and Samantha behind me, it makes all the difference." Their time together grew more frequent, and as the bond between them deepened, their friendship turned into something more. It was a quiet shift, barely noticeable at first, until one afternoon in the park when George, his heart pounding with vulnerability, decided to take a leap. "Claire, I've been meaning to tell you something," he began, his voice soft but earnest. "Over these months, I've started to feel something more for you. You've become such an important part of my life, and I can't ignore it anymore." Claire stopped walking, her surprise mirrored by a shy, almost hesitant smile. "I feel the same way," she confessed. "I was afraid to say anything. I didn't want to complicate things, but I'm glad you feel the same." Relief and happiness flooded her face as she reached out to take his hand. For both of them, this was a new beginning, one they could embrace together. As the weeks passed, George and Claire's relationship grew, their connection deepening with each passing day. They leaned on each other, finding solace and comfort in the love they were building. Emma and Samantha, too, saw the changes in Claire, and they wholeheartedly supported the blossoming relationship. Emma, especially, was happy to see her daughter finding happiness after everything they had been through. On a bright, sunny afternoon, Emma, Claire, and Samantha found themselves at the local park, a place that had become a symbol of new beginnings. Emma sat on a bench, watching her daughter and granddaughter kicking a soccer ball around on the grass. Claire sat beside her, resting after the fun-filled game. "It's so good to see you two like this," Emma said, her voice filled with contentment. "It feels like we can finally breathe again, like we've really left the past behind." Claire smiled warmly as she glanced at Samantha, who was laughing and running across the field. "Mom, I don't think I could have gotten through all of this without you and Samantha. She's like the daughter I never had." The sincerity in Claire's voice made Emma's heart swell with love. Samantha ran over to them, her face bright with energy. "Grandma, will you come play with us?" She called, her enthusiasm infectious. "Of course, dear. Let's see if I still know how to play soccer." Emma laughed, getting up to join them. The three of them ran onto the field, and Emma felt a joy she hadn't experienced in a long time. As they played, Claire watched from the sidelines, her heart full of gratitude for the simple, beautiful moments they were now able to enjoy. "You know, Mom," Claire said quietly as she joined them on the field, kicking the ball back to Samantha, "I think we finally understand what's truly important." Emma smiled, squeezing Claire's shoulder. "No matter what happened, we're together now, and that's what counts." They continued to play, laughing and enjoying each other's company as the sun began to set. As the day came to an end, the three of them walked back home hand in hand, the warmth of their togetherness carrying them forward into a future they were ready to face, united, stronger, and filled with hope. "We're in this together," Emma said, her voice soft but filled with certainty as she squeezed both Claire's and Samantha's hands. And so, step by step, they continued their journey, rebuilding their lives, embracing the love they had for each other, and ready to face whatever the future held.